All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Transition to Academic Writing. This is February's webinar in a monthly series hosted by Aspen's Alumni and Career Services. I'm Allie, and I'm your Alumni and Career Services Specialist. You can find upcoming events and see more resources we have to offer on our website, which I will drop into the chat shortly. If you're interested in attending more webinars that are focused on writing, there is a scholarly writing series being given by another faculty member, Dr. Nina Beeman, with different topics each month. And the next one is going to be March 12th. And that one specifically is going to dive into grammar. I'll put a link to that series webpage in the chat where you can see recordings of the past sessions and register for the upcoming ones. This webinar is also being recorded and it will be uploaded to Aspen's YouTube channel. It's a small group today. If you have any questions or comments throughout, Nagin has given permission to go ahead and ask as they come up. You can also feel free to type any questions or comments in the chat throughout, and we can do Q&A at the end as well. I am very pleased to have Nagin Mohi as our speaker today. Nagin is an accomplished published poet with over 2 decades of experience teaching at the collegiate level. She has an extensive expertise in freshman level college writing courses, specializing in composition, rhetoric, and research. For the past 3 years, she's been a valued member of the Aspen community, serving as both a doctoral advisor and an instructor for the Intro to Academic Writing courses. Nikita and I were on the academic advising team at the same time, and I can personally attest that she is awesome. Nagin, thank you so much for being here. You have the
Thank
floor.
you, Ali, I appreciate you so much. Thank you. And again, I do miss the whole team, but I've been situating pretty well here in my new role as an instructor for the humanities courses. And I do believe that what I have here, the knowledge that I have here to give to our aspiring students will definitely make that transition to academic writing a little bit easier. So I guess I'll just go ahead and pop us over to the first slide. This here, I'm not going to read the whole thing out to you all, but it really just is an introduction for new and returning students. Something that I've been noticing is a lot of our students are coming back to school after having very rewarding careers within the healthcare field. And it could be very daunting to some people who are professionals and now need to sound like one on paper, if that makes sense. So that's pretty much what I'm going to help us all learn a little bit about here today. And basically, understanding writing an academic paper is just another form of communication. Communication entails an author, an audience, and a message that you need to structure with purpose and with tone to make sure that your audience receives it correctly. Um, what we're going to be going through here is not just what is an academic context, what does something well researched look like, but we're also going to go a little bit further into creating that foundation or that structure of what it means to be a student first. I feel a lot of my students don't really turn off nurse mode, and they are presenting themselves as a nurse instead of an academic. So, what I want to show here for us is the overview of the different pieces of information that I want to go over. Like Ali said, since this is a small group, please feel free to chime in with any questions that you might have. These 6 bullet points here are the 6 main slides that I've created for us to discuss moving forward. And I try to do it in a way that makes sense from kind of like start to finish of what you would experience in your first couple courses here at Aspen. The first thing that we are going to look into is scholarly communication. Basically, how you can hone your email etiquette with your instructors and your advisors and make sure that your message is being received in the light in which you want it to be received. Then we're going to move on to academic expectations, basically, how to prepare for such things as the minimum requirements or due dates, or even the work ethic that is expected of our students as you enter our classrooms. We will then move on to assignment instructions. I decided to put this in here because I have noticed that teaching the first course, this might be the first course in a long time for some students coming back into the academic mindset. And, it could be tricky just navigating your online courses. That alone could put you behind in terms of making sure you are following the course schedules. So I'm going to show us how to be doing that, and also how to read instructions. I know that sounds a little derivative, but there is a good technique to thoroughly read the instructions of your assignments to make sure that you are aware of all the objectives that you need to hit within them. We'll then move on to instructor feedback. As an instructor, I love giving feedback. I feel it's one of the best ways for students to grow, especially with their revisions, with their further assignments. So I'm going to show you how to locate those and how to utilize that feedback as well. Our final two slides are going to dive into academic writing in its totality. So, we're going to discuss the elements of academic writing, basically how to make sure that your assignments and your writing is clear, concise, and consistent in formal tone. And Ali did mention that we do have a web series on academic writing that will go further into that, which I highly suggest. If it's not something that you do frequently, definitely take a shot at one of those other webinars as well. We are going to end with how to review scholarly literature, just kind of what to look out for when you are looking for other authors or sources to bring into your work to support your arguments and claims. We're going to learn how to research current, relevant, and credible information. So before I move on to that first slide, I just want to check in and make sure we don't have any questions before we move on. All right. So the first slide I have here for us is scholarly communication. I do have an example of a student email off to the side, pretty much just the standard structure. Now, all these bullet points here are pieces of information to remember when emailing someone within the university, specifically your instructor. So, professional email addresses. I have noticed a lot of students will use their personal accounts, but some personal accounts don't really give the information of the person who um, who created the account. I know the first accounts that I made, like on AOL and Hotmail, they're not quite professional, so I just kind of let those die. Most professional email addresses should have preferably have something that includes your name. I have had some really funny ones in the past that I don't need to share, but if you do have a personal email address that does have your name attached to it, that would be preferable. And if it doesn't, if your email address doesn't have your name in it, you definitely want to make sure that you have that formal salutation, that you introduce yourself. A lot of instructors will see an email and have no idea who's attached to it. So the more information you give your instructor is key. Something else I noticed is the use of a clear subject line, basically summarizing the purpose of your email. Include any kind of identifying information you can. You want to keep in mind that a lot of your instructors teach multiple courses or with multiple start dates. So if you just send out an email with no subject line, it's going to be very difficult for them to get back to you. The goal is to make it the easiest transaction of communication as possible. If you just say you have a question or you need help with something, you want to state specifically what the assignment is. Um, you want the letters of the course you're in. Like, for example, if you're in one of mine, HUM 410, you also want to give the start date as well. That way, your instructor can pinpoint exactly which person, which course is speaking to them, and they don't have to go rummaging for that information or have to waste time asking you to identify yourself. Formal salutation is always kind and courteous. Anything like a hello or dear, and you want to make sure you had your instructor's name. Now, I want you to also recall that some of your instructors, I would say most of your instructors, have doctorate degrees. So you're going to be saying hello, doctor, and then making sure you spell their last name correctly. Um, I am an MFA. I am not a doctor. My position within the school is that of an instructor, not a professor. So that's also just these little things that you want to make sure that you catch on to before you direct that email. You always want to make sure you introduce yourself. Who are you? What's your course title? Your start date? You just want to be as respectful as you can for your instructor there. Um, Another thing I noticed is the body of the message. You want to have something concise, a concise message. You want to get to the point as soon as you can because, like I said, your instructors have limited time. They have hundreds of students. The faster you can get to the point, the easier they can respond to you. You want to avoid any unneeded information and just be specific, get to the point. This is a good place to avoid like flowery language unless you have built some sort of relationship with your instructors where that is okay. You do just want to avoid unneeded information and get to the point. um, I can't stress this one enough. Using a polite tone. I feel as though a lot of us don't understand when our tones or the text that we use can kind of get lost in translation. You want to make sure that your language is as respectful as possible. Your goal is to create a dialogue. You don't want to infer any negative tones nor imply them through passive aggressive remarks. Ali and I can both attest to years of emails and how tone can definitely be misconstrued. I used to have students tell me like my instructor gave me really mean feedback, and when it's all in text, you can't really infer the correct tone. So you want to immediately believe that it is positive and not negative because no one's goal here is to make this harder. Our goal is to work together and to make you a stronger student. um, my last piece of advice for communicating with your instructors and your advisors, just make sure that you're proofreading, proofread carefully. Your emails to instructors are meant to be formal. You want to review your email for any kind of spelling and grammar errors before sending them, or just kind of minimize or mitigate the amount of errors that could be misconstrued. This again is just a good way. It shows you in a good light. It shows you and it shows your instructor that you are here to gain advice and to gain the knowledge that you need to move forward. Um, any questions at all about how to communicate with your instructors, or if there's any kind of language that you should or should not be using? All right. If there is anything in the chat, I am unable to see it while I'm presenting. So Allie could also stop us and let us know if we have any questions. But
I
we're going to go.
absolutely will. Yeah. Nagin, I
Yeah.
did actually just have a question come up in the chat, so I thought I'd
Yeah. Go for
email.
it.
This is great. Katie is asking, how can I find my instructor's email address?
That is
That's the
such a
question.
good question.
Thanks, Katie.
Because I've been on both sides. Like I've been the student, I've been the instructor, I've been the advisor. So I found all the cool ways to find the instructor's information. The first thing you would do is go to your course homepage. The course homepage has everything listed out for you there. You'll find on the right hand side, if you scroll down towards the bottom, you will see a picture or an icon of your instructor with their name. Under that, you'll see a blue envelope. If you hover over it, it gives you your instructor's email address.
If you don't mind, Nagin, is that okay if I add to that?
Oh, I would love for you to do that. Yes, please.
Just for a second place to find the email address, it's also going to be in the class list tab along the top of the page of your course. And then, as Nagin mentioned, when you hover over that envelope to find the email address, just don't click on the envelope to send a message that way, because the internal messaging system doesn't work very well. It's very unreliable. So we always recommend that students email their instructors with their email account that is outside of the classroom, just to clarify that.
No, that's a really good piece of information. I apparently had a student trying to email me through the internal messaging, and I wasn't receiving any of their information. And then I got a rude email, like, to my actual email address a little bit later, and I had to explain to them how the internal messaging doesn't work. So that's a good call. Any other questions? All right. All right, we're going to move on to academic expectations. Now, the reason I feel this is so important is because your instructors do expect you to come into the classroom with some wherewithal of what it means to be a student. Um, I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, "When's this due?" And all the information can be found in the course syllabus. If you just know how to um, kind of know where to find the information before you have to ask the question, or just scour through your course homepage before you have to get there, that can alleviate a lot of those misunderstandings, if you will. So, the first thing that we do expect of our students is to have some sort of time management. Our courses are developed for full time students, full time workers with families. We have like a kind of a rigid set system where your courses are 8 weeks in length and you do have specific due dates, but how you read your materials and when you get there and how you get to that due date is really all up to your own time management. So, if you take a look over to the screenshot that I have with the week course schedule, this is something that you are going to see in every single one of your courses. All your courses are 8 weeks in length. Every week you are completing a module. Each module is structured completely the same. I will actually get to that on how to navigate your courses in just a moment. So that'll be in the next slide. But this is just some good information to know. And this is also stuff that you will pick up in your new student orientation as well. I highly recommend having your new student orientation. And if you can't do that, just have a conversation with your advisor if you can before you get started. I promise it alleviates a lot of the frustration before you get started. So we expect you to know when your due dates are, that your courses begin on Tuesdays, your first discussions are due on Thursdays, your replies are due on Sundays, and all your major writing assignments are due on the Mondays that finish off that week. So you want to make sure that you're plugging in your due dates as you're getting situated, and that you've got a plan moving forward with the course to make sure you can hit all of those requirements. Speaking of requirements, the minimum requirements. Now, minimum requirements are pretty much just, the threshold that you want to make sure that you are on the opposite side of, so that you can gain all the necessary points and that you are showing that you're fulfilling those objectives. Discussion and writing assignments, they all have their own instructions and rubrics. They all state the requirements that you need. For example, I know discussion questions, you need a minimum of 250 words. I'll have some students that write 3 sentences and think that that qualifies for a discussion post, which it does not. You want to be able to show critical thinking. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking for you who can just answer a question. We're looking for how you answer the question and how you extrapolate upon that information with your own critical accord. So, with that said, in order for us to receive your information, to receive your submissions, we need to make sure that you have Microsoft Word, you have reliable internet connectivity. These are all just the little things that if you don't have them situated before you begin, it's going to just create a hard time for you moving on with the program. Another expectation is engagement. I have taught in person, I have taught online, and I do know that recreating the communal bond within an online course is very difficult. So, these discussion questions that are posed every week, these are here to help create that kind of community, if you will, where you can bounce ideas off one another, where you can help each other see from different perspectives. So when you see that you have to reply to peers, you're required to reply to peers, and kind of expand upon the post that they've made. You want to make sure your replies are engaging. The goal is to create or to further develop ideas between one another, to just kind of give that sense of community and how we build that communal backbone by a give and take, some sort of dialogue to continue. If you reply to your peer, "Hey, this sounds great!" exclamation point, and just kind of move on, that's not really engaging with the content. That's not further developing the ideas. So just consider that. And I would love to say that I believe my own students within my courses, the amount of engagement that we get out of these discussion questions are just absolutely thrilling. I've seen some students just become friends after commenting on each other's posts, and continuing to just kind of bolster each other up and just make sure that sense of community is there. Probably my favorite thing about teaching online. Um, I do have in here academic integrity. We do expect you to understand what plagiarism is before you begin with us. I did go ahead and hyperlink the code of conduct and the student integrity statements from the academic catalog onto this section here. It is quite too long for me to go over with you now. But a good rule of thumb is to make sure when you are submitting your information that you stay below the 20% threshold with quoted material. A lot of times plagiarism can be accidental or unintended. And unfortunately, that still is plagiarism, even if you didn't intend to do so. And I do find that issue commonly with my international students. There might be some like different like guidelines for international schooling, but here in the US, like the way that we have learned and how to correctly cite and bring in another author's words, it's all kind of different. So you want to make sure that you are reading through that academic integrity statement and that you are abiding by that 20% threshold. There are a couple of things I could say that could help you out here. If you do find that you're going over the 20%, that could mean that you just have too much quoted material. So what you could do here is minimize the information that you're bringing in from another author by either summarizing or paraphrasing it in your own words while still adding the citation at the end so that the reader understands this information is coming from another author. You've just lessened the amount of words. Another thing would be to make sure when you are summarizing and paraphrasing that you're not stringing together more than three direct words in a row. Once you do three or more words directly from another author, that's going to pop up as plagiarism. So definitely want to work on those paraphrasing skills. That could definitely help you out in the long run with academic integrity. The last thing I have here under academic expectations, I don't think many instructors talk about this, but it's self advocacy. And this is one of the main tenets I abide by in my own teaching philosophy, is making sure that students have the ability to understand their needs, their rights, their responsibilities, and how they can effectively communicate for themselves in any academic setting. Um, I have had way too many students just drop a course after receiving a low grade instead of advocating for themselves to go to their instructor and say, "Hey, I know I got a low grade. I would like to know what I can do differently." I will always allow my students another chance to show that they understood the objectives of the assignment. I've had students go from D's to A's because of this. Not all instructors are the same, but I do believe it is very important for students to understand that they do have needs and rights that should be listened to. Before we move on to the next one, I would like to know if we have any questions on the academic expectations.
We do. Just on that first point on time management, we have a
Yeah, for
question in
sure.
the chat. Do you have any resources for time management that could help students? I do actually have a recent blog post on Aspen's Altitude blog that goes through some time management tips and has some like downloadable schedules. So I'm
Awesome.
posting that in the chat now. But I
Yeah.
also wanted to let you know, Nagina, that question was there and see if you had
Yeah.
any
For sure, yeah.
suggestions.
I used to be the worst time manager. I'm like I'm a creative spirit, so it was very difficult for me to get into like a linear structure, if you will. But I find that my brain works visually. So for me, I like to create schedules that are color coded. And that really helps me understand how much of my time is being utilized. I'm a huge fan of Google Calendar, specifically for the variety of that option, the way that you can structure the tasks that you need to get done, how you can create events for major assignments, if you need to set aside blocks of study time that you won't do unless it's staring at you in the face. Definitely utilize some sort of digital calendar like that that can beep or notify you to like, hey, get back on track, stuff like that. That's my go-to for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Looks like that's it for now.
All right. Well, I was hoping for something on the advocacy because I love letting students know that they're allowed to speak up for themselves. Alrighty. We're gonna move on here to assignment instructions. Basically, how to locate them, how to understand them, and more specifically, how to read those instructions as well. So I have a couple of screenshots off to the side here for you. Once you are registered for a course and it opens up and you are able to dive into it, you get into your course and you click on the content tab. When in doubt, click on the content tab. The content tab shows you your table of contents, module 1 through 8, all the way down on the left hand side. And every time you click on one of those modules, you'll see a screen like this open up. It gives you your module, the content of the module, and all the items that are listed underneath it as well. This is the fastest way, in my opinion, for you to understand what's going on in your course as quick as possible. Navigating your course tabs, if you just want to see what discussion is due or what assignment is due, if you click on the discussion or the Dropbox tabs, you're not going to get the full scope of that module. You're basically just going to get like a submission folder. Here, submit your assignment, and you'll be like, I have no idea what I need to submit. So when you start in the content tab and you follow through your modules that way, and you are able to click into your module overview, you're able to get into your discussion, able to get into your assignment. Here is where you'll get all the information that you need to be successful. Most of your questions about your assignments can be answered through the module overview. When you click in there, you will be able to see the objectives of that unit. You'll see your required and additional readings and resources. This is a big one. A lot of times I will notice when a student hasn't utilized the readings when they're answering their discussion questions, because it's very vague, it's very unintended, and it's short, very brief. If you are able to go through the required and the recommended materials, it'll give you just an armory of information to make sure that you are creating very deliberate and well thought out responses to the prompts that we are giving you. Within the the module assignment does pretty much the same thing. It includes a description or a prompt of the assignment, the instructions, and the rubric. You'll see down here at the second screenshot that I have given you. It's the one that's right down here. Every single discussion and assignment will have something to this accord: instructions and specifications, the submissions, and the rubric. I highly suggest taking a look at all this information before actually submitting so you are as aware as you can be of the expectations of the assignment before you submit. Now, in order to be able to do that, you need to make sure that you are reading the assignment instructions as thoroughly as possible. I'm guilty of this myself when I was in my undergraduate degree and I was in some courses that were electives. I just needed to get out. I just needed to get them done. You would really just kind of like skim or peruse the information and be like, I think I've got enough to put it together. But for a course that's only 8 weeks, a course where every single assignment is weighted towards that final grade, you want to make sure that you are giving the correct amount of time that is needed for something of like this. You don't want to skip any sections of the prompt or any of the requirements of what's asking for you. For example, there is an assignment in your HUM 410 course which is asking you to conduct a literature review, and this gives you bullet point by bullet point of information that you need to make sure that you're adding into it. And I'll have students that just do like a handful of the bullet points instead of going through every single one, and their grade will fall because they haven't really looked into what was needed. You need to be able, pardon me, you need to determine the purpose of the assignment through the prompt. Okay, so why am I doing this? What is the purpose of completing this assignment? You need to review the specific requirements. 7 to 10 paragraphs. How long are they? How many sources do I need to bring in? You want to make sure that you've got kind of like a list of all those things you need to add. You want to make sure that you understand all the criterion within the rubric as well. Anything from content to organization to supportive sources to APA and your APA and your grammar and mechanics. All of that comes together in one main assignment. You want to be able to know that you're utilizing your available resources and that you're asking clarifying questions. If you think that you have scoured your assignment instructions and you've read every piece of information you need and you are still confused about something, reach out to your instructor. Ask them, hey, in this part or in this area of the assignment prompt, what is actually being asked of me? You're more than welcome to speculate. I believe it's asking me to do XYZ. Is this correct? You'd be surprised. When you ask your instructor clarifying questions like that, it lets them know that you are not only putting in the time and effort, but you are actually wanting to hit the objective the way that you're intended to. These are all really great ways to make sure that um, you minimize the chance of error before you submit. I'll definitely stop for any questions that we might have on this because this could be a tough one.
Nothing in the chat at the moment. I just want to remind everyone we have a pretty small group, so if you do have a question you'd like to ask just with your voice, please feel free.
Oh, absolutely. And I know this one doesn't really sound important. Like I know how to read. I understand that. But once you get to that first assignment where you're not quite sure and you still attempt to do it without asking those clarifying questions. And when you get that feedback back, you'll kind of be kicking yourself like, I should have asked that question instead of having to learn the hard way through a point deduction. So definitely something to consider. Oh, excellent. I almost forgot. Instructor feedback. Excellent. So, what happens when you know where to find the information? You've done all of your reading, you've made your submission, and now it's time for you to receive your assessment. How do you take feedback from an instructor, this person that you don't know and is just assessing you and giving value to the work that you've produced? As a creative writer, I can tell you feedback can be very difficult to receive if you're viewing it as criticism. So let's kind of back up a little bit and look at the location and methods of that feedback. The screenshot I have here is from the Dropbox tab for your course. Now, once you have submitted your assignment and you get a notification that that feedback is available, when you click in your Dropbox tab, you can take a look and see like what the assignment was, and then you'll see the completion status, the score, and the evaluation status. The evaluation status is where you are going to find the feedback from your instructor. Usually there will be a link underneath evaluation status. It'll say read or unread. If it's your first time there, it's going to be unread. And you're going to click on that. And then you're going to come up to a new page that shows you kind of, your overall score, your rubric and where you placed on the rubric, as well as additional comments from your instructor. Now, there are many different ways your instructor can leave you feedback. They can leave you feedback in marginal comments and track changes within the document that you submitted. So you'd have to download that to find the information that they left you. They can leave you end note comments. End note you'll just find right there under the evaluation status once you've clicked on it, and it'll give you kind of that paragraph that they've left for you. And my favorite, audio recordings. Sometimes I just have a lot to say, and the way that I want to explain the revisions my students need to make, I know that the tone could be misconstrued via text. So I love giving audio recordings for my students and letting them know what they did well and what areas they need to develop. I'll never tell my students that they did something wrong. I don't believe in you did something wrong. I believe that there is something that you created that can be further developed to maximize your full proficiency. And that is where you are going to find that feedback and those different methods of feedback. So, what is the point? Why do instructors even bother giving you feedback on an assignment if your grade's already in? Well, a feedback is how students can assess how well they're doing within each specific assignment, and the overall mastery of the course as well. The feedback lets you know which objectives you were able to hit, which ones you still need a little bit further development. Feedback shows which criteria are being accomplished and which criteria need further development. So if your APA is on point, your rubric will show you that, like, hey, you get APA perfectly, but when it comes to the additional critical thinking behind bringing in supportive content, like how can you best utilize your creative information to coincide with that author's information. You should be able to utilize feedback for revisions, specifically in HUM 410. The entire course, you are writing one paper, but you're completing one section at a time and you're building towards that final paper. So for my students, I let them know you need to be utilizing this feedback. So, if you've completed the first section and now you're on the second section, but I've given you feedback now for the first section, when you're giving me that third section, I want to be able to see that you've made those revisions to those first and second sections. So it shows me that you are following my feedback and you're able to make the revisions in time as you are completing the rest of your work. If you save 7 sections worth of revisions for the very last week of the course, that's not very good time management. I have had a lot of students ask for course extensions because they left all the revisions to the end and they didn't really manipulate their time wisely. So these are just like things to consider. When you are given feedback, you know where it is, you know how you're receiving it, you know why you're receiving it. And if you're able to utilize that feedback earlier rather than later, you're going to start seeing an improvement in your overall score. I did add this last part here, the benefits of feedback, mostly for the students who believe that feedback is criticism. It is not criticism. Our job is not to sit here and call you a bad writer. Our job is to show you the opportunities that you have for reflection and growth within your work. This helps build a relationship between the instructor and student. I've had so many students at the end of the course be like, "Hey, it was your feedback that let me know that I could do this. That I can hit my marks and I can create the best version of myself on paper as I could." And that's the whole point of feedback. It's not to make you feel bad or negatively about yourself, but it is to help you look inward on yourself and what you're creating and how you can show not just me but like yourself that you are capable of making these improvements. The entire benefit of feedback is to enrich your self-reflection and overall just strengthen that quality of your work. Any questions on feedback before I continue on? Not bad. All right. So now we're on to the final two slides, and these are the two slides that I just really want to make sure that you come away with something. If there's a way for you to screenshot these two slides, definitely worth it. If you want to go ahead and jot down these points, that's also worth it. These are also these bullet points of information are also going to be extrapolated on further in that other webinar series of academic and scholarly writing. So don't be too hesitant on grabbing that information. These are the key elements of academic writing, and just the consistencies that you need to lock down on as you're going through and completing your assignments for your courses. The first point, make sure it's clear, concise, and consistent. You want to ensure that your reader understands the purpose of what you are writing. And by doing that, you need to make sure that all of your claims are direct. You don't want to be indirect with fluffy language. You want to be very clear with your reader, like, this is what I mean. The way to do this is to reduce wordiness and redundancy. A lot of students see a minimum word count and they think, how can I just come up with a bunch of words to fill in that space? When you realize that when you get to the point and then you give the support to that point and then you explain that point, you'll be filling up a lot more space than just fluffy language. Um, you want to directly state that purpose. You want to establish reliability and flow of information. Reliability is very, very clearly, if I'm reading through the introduction of a paper and it's filled with flowery language, I'm not seeing any sources. There's a lot of maybe type comments, maybe kind of comments. I already know that the writer of that paper is not going to be reliable. They didn't do their preliminary research. They don't have an argument that they are believing in because they're not using that direct established language. The flow of information is very important. A lot of students have a difficulty understanding that their audience does not have all the information that they have in their heads when they're writing. So a lot of the time we infer or we imply information because we think the audience is on the same page as us. You want to go in thinking that you have to construct the whole context behind your paper for someone who has maybe never even heard of it. You want to be as direct and to the point as possible. You want to make sure that information flows for them so they don't have to ask questions, be like, wait, how do I know this is true? Or, well, this is one point. What about this other point? If you can flow that information very clearly from start to finish, and that will mitigate the amount of questions from your audience, that is a really good step forward to making sure that you are a reliable person of information for that topic. The other thing to consider with academic writing is perspective and voice. Now, this is very difficult, especially for, I would say, especially for nurses, where majority of your work is through your very subjective lens, right? Like, I did this, I administered this medication, these are my patients, things like that. For an academic paper, it's a very huge shift in perspective and voice. Instead of working in first and second person, you are writing in third person perspective. Third person perspective is more objective, it's more persuasive, and it reduces wordiness. Another way that we reduce wordiness is to avoid passive voice in favor of active voice. Now, a lot of people have no idea what that means. And honestly, I didn't really understand this until I was in grad school because, well, there's a whole situation there. But let's put it this way. Active voice is when the subject verbs the object. Passive voice is when the object is verbed by the subject. You can use the example of the boy threw the ball. Subject verbs the object. Now, if you wrote that sentence as the ball was thrown by the boy, you are adding a whole bunch of words to say the exact same thing. So that's why in academic writing, we prefer active voice. Very, very structured and to the point. It is also standard English writing to use active instead of passive voice. If this is still confusing, you can always take a look at some writing exercises on the Purdue OWL website. Or even take a look at that other web series that we have on correct like grammar and mechanics and things like that. Other than that, another element would be logical structure. You want to make sure that when you are creating a thesis and you have multiple claims, you want to make sure that you are bringing them up in a very logical manner. So, a good way I like to tell my students, so like, how are you going to structure your information is, are you going to go the problem solution route? Are you going to go chronological if you're explaining changes made to medical history? What kind of approach do you want to take? It could be anything from like most influential factors to your topic and then slowly go down to the least, or you can switch that, talk about the least effective factor and then work your way to the very last, the most important factor. A lot of students take a serialized approach to their theses, where it's like this argument is right because of X, Y, and Z, and there's no real connection between that X, Y, and Z. And what that does is it doesn't really create a coherent structure, so it doesn't become as persuasive as something with a better flow of information would. So when you want to figure out what kind of points you're making and how you can connect them, you want to have a plan before you start that writing. You want to begin with like, okay, it's like what is my argument? What major claim am I making? And what are the main points I want to include about that main claim? What's a logical way for me to order these points? Here are three things are seemingly unattached, but how can I find a way to show that they are not only connected with one another, but there is a very logical reason for me to deliver this information in the order that I did? I would say like back in grade school, you would get those transitions like first, second, last. Think about it like that, but like a with more intention behind it. Why is this one first? Why is this one second? Why is this one last? And make sure that your audience understands that as well. In order to do that, you also need to make sure you've got support, citation, research. You want to remember that you are the key author of your paper. Your instructor can go do all the research that you're doing. They're not going to be impressed by all these different things that you bring in. They want to see what you are capable of thinking. If you've made an argument, your entire reason of bringing in support is just that, to support the argument you made through scholarly sources, websites. It's what makes your claims credible. Why should I just sit here and take your word for it? Oh, you've got sources that are current, relevant, unbiased. They're from an author that has authority on the subject. All of this information is what's going to make your critical thinking even stronger. A lot of students, it comes time to completing the annotated bibliography for your HUM 410 course, I'll see students using sources from the 1980s, and that's not current, that's not relevant. You want to keep in mind this key information is for scholarly writing, academic writing, you don't want to use sources that are older than 10 years. 10 years. So anything after before 2015, you should not be using within your work. Now to like kind of like double down on that, I would go further and say don't go past 5 years. Especially since this is like healthcare related, medical field related information. This information is being updated every single day. So like for some of your topics 10 years ago may be too long. I always suggest starting within the 5-year slot. And then if you need to move backwards from there, you can. You want to make sure that your information does come from trusted areas. Um, there'll be other webinar series, and within your HUM courses as well, there is an assignment that shows you how to use databases and how to use the filters. And one of those filters is to make sure that you're only receiving peer-reviewed scholarly articles and to make sure that you get the full text of them. These are just other ways to make sure that you are getting the correct information from the internet. um, the last thing to remember about elements of academic writing is formal tone. Formal tone is objective, it's impersonal, and it's technical. It's characterized by precise language, specific facts, lack of casual or conversational language. This is probably one of the harder things for my students to break free of, mostly because, like I said, nursing itself is a very subjective field where you do rely a lot on your anecdotal experiences that shape the claims and arguments that you might have for your papers. So this, I would say, is the hardest transition for students to go from that casual conversational abbreviated language to that more formal, rigid, structured kind of tone. There's a ton of exercises online that you could do that can help you kind of transition from that one language to another. Are there any questions on elements of academic writing?
We do have a couple questions in the chat here.
All
The
right.
first one is, how much is too much or too little when it comes to citations and use of outside sources?
20%. I know that's a silly answer, but that is a fantastic question, right? You're kind of inundated with all of these ways in which to structure your information. Think about that 20% line. Back when I used to teach composition rhetoric for college freshmen for their undergrads, I would break it down even further for them. I would tell them, think about using 2 pieces of information per paragraph that you put together. That way, you'll know that you're not going to go over that 20% threshold. If, let's say, an academic paragraph is 8 to 10 sentences, and 2 of those sentences are cited material, that's keeping you within that 20% guideline. So students who need to see it more structured, I would deliver the information for them that way. You definitely want to make sure anytime you are claiming an argument to be true, there is some sort of evidence to back that up. You don't want to just kind of leave those hanging. But yeah, that 20% rule is really going to help you out with determining how much or how little.
Awesome. Okay, we do have a couple more already. Uh,
Awesome. Yeah.
Before I ask the next one, I just want to let everyone know if you're getting a little nervous about time, we are recording this. It's going to be uploaded to YouTube and I'll email it out to everyone who registered as well. So you'll definitely have a copy of the whole presentation. And then moving on to the next question. And this is something I really relate to this question. My strength in writing is being concise and to the point. So I often
Nice.
get anxious about hitting a word minimum. So the question is, I have a difficult time writing a 2,000 word paper. I have the
Mhm.
information, but it's difficult for me. Is there a template to have my information flow? I get anxiety. Please help. Thank you.
So I have a template that I use, and like I said, it's for the students who really need the structure. I found a way to break down a body paragraph into like 10 steps, if you will. Now, bear with me. If this is being recorded, if you don't have time to write it down, but you always begin with the topic statement. If you are transitioning from a point to another, good, that gives you another sentence to work with. Um, Related to X point, here is why. And then you make that claim for why. Now, when you bring in that topic statement with the direct claim, now you think to yourself, I need to bring in a piece of supporting evidence. You do a segue type sentence. According to X author, bring in the information. Now, you've got your claim, you've got your support. Now, what do? This is where your explanation, analysis, and synthesis skills come in handy. This is where you can take 2 to 3 sentences to explain to your audience where that connection between your support and claim come together. You're ready at 5, 6 sentences for your first paragraph, just following those couple of steps right there. If you need to bring in another piece of supportive material, you can say, in addition to author X, here is author Y. Bring in that supportive information as well. Then you can take another couple of sentences again to analyze, synthesize that information, and really make it clear to your audience how this information reflects back up to that topic statement.
That was awesome. Thank you, Nagin. We
I
have,
really I really miss teaching those, I'm not gonna lie.
um, if it's all right with you, I might ask you to send me that written out and I can include it with the email and maybe even write a blog post about it.
Yeah,
Um,
sure,
because
yeah.
I think a lot of people will really benefit from breaking it down every step of the way like that.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely, yeah, I've got a ton of these resources, I'd love to.
Excellent. One final question for this section. Do you have advice for students who are English language learners? Pretty
Yes, I
broad
do.
topic.
Yeah, I used to actually help, teach students towards their TOEFL test, making sure, like, they got everything they need. Um, the my first piece of advice for students who have English as a second language is, 1, do not get held back by any limitations you have of the English language. When you look at your rubric and the breakdown, that is such a small a percentage of what you're being graded on, that it's the content and the sources that we find to be more important. Knowing that, and you still do wanna develop those skills further, there are a bunch of different, websites that offer, um, grammar and mechanical exercises that you can practice on your own time to become more competent within those deliverables. Allie, if you would like, I could also find a couple of those websites with those exercises and send them to you if you'd like to do that.
I would love that. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, I could totally do that. Any other questions on this?
That's all I got in the chat for now.
Sweet. Well, this is the very last one. It's on reviewing scholarly literature. If there is one thing that really sets academic writing apart from all the other writing, it is this. I do have a little screenshot here of the research process. This is a very uncomplicated way to look at basically the first course you have in your undergrad program here. Everything from finding a topic to evaluating the sources you need on that topic. So I kind of broke down this process for you here in these 4 bullet points. Especially in your HUM 410 course, the very first assignment you have is having you pick a topic that is related to healthcare. And that topic that you pick is going to follow you the rest of those 8 weeks, making sure that you are adding to that topic as you go. So, topic selection is pretty important. If you pick a topic that you don't really know much about or can't find much about, then you're going to get stuck midway through. So, topics usually begin very broad, but they can be narrowed down to a specific scope or aspect. At Aspen, your topic is required to be relevant to healthcare. So, let me give you an example. Um, if you pick a topic, you'd be like, obesity. That's a pretty big problem here, right? Obesity is much too broad of a topic to just write about. So, if you want to make it more specific in scope, maybe you want to discuss management or medications for it. Right now, GLP-1s are a really big trending aspect that is related towards obesity. So maybe you can look into the prevalence of GLP-1 medications and their effect on obesity. That is a really very quick and simple way to show you how you could take a very broad topic and narrow it down immediately by just looking at the different aspects of it. Now, if you don't know how to narrow down your topic, that's what preliminary research is for. Narrow down your topic, search for any relevant trends or information on it. If you start finding too much information, that's your go ahead to know you need to start narrowing it down a little bit. If you don't find enough information, that's when you know you need to start broadening your scope. Preliminary research could be as simple as a Google search, like, hey, what's going on with obesity in the United States within the last 10 years? You'll start looking at trends. You'll start looking at increases or decreases. You'll start looking at implementations of new medications. And suddenly, you now have all of this information to work with on this one little topic that you found, and you can start looking into in different ways. When the way that we research this information is the reason why we have a library here at Aspen. Now, all students have access to the Aspen Library through their classroom. If you take a look up at the tabs on your Aspen classroom, you'll see towards the very, very end that there is just library. When you click on that, you'll get all the information you need about not only our library, all the articles and databases we have access to, you also have contact with the librarians. Librarians have their own email address. You can ask them questions about your research topic and maybe let them know what direction you want to go in. If you need any kind of help with that at all, they are there to help you out with. Now, if any of you are lucky enough to get me to teach you for your HUM 410 courses, you could also ask me those questions. I've been a research freak for the last 20, 30 years. And I love helping my students find information on their topics, especially when they're just lost and can't find it. The last piece of information that I'm going to leave you with here is on how to evaluate your sources, how to make sure that the information you're using to support your arguments are actually valid. I use the CARS approach: CARS, credibility, accuracy, reliability, and support. Determine if the author and publisher have authority on the topic. Is this like Mike's podcast from 10 years ago? Or are we looking into like the Journal of Medicine? Um, you want to make sure the source is current and factual. Not only is it within the time frame that we deem to be current, but you want to make sure that it's actually factual. Is this the only scientist saying this thing, or has this information been cooperated across the community? The source needs to be fair, absent of bias. You'll actually find that information in a lot of the studies that you look into. There'll be like an area, like if there's any conflict of interest or anything, the writers or the authors of that article will tell you if there is any conflict of interest or if there isn't any at all. The source documents evidence through references and is substantiated by more authors. This basically means, does this article have a reference list? Take a look at that reference list. Is it outdated? Is it still pertinent information? There's another way to check as well. You can see if the article that you're looking at has been cited by other authors since it was written. That's another way to know that you do have a very solid piece of information to help you move forward with your writing. So that's all the information that I've got for you today. If there are any other further questions, please go ahead and let me know, and I would love to answer them for you.
Nikki, thank you so much. That was such a good, useful presentation. I'm really excited to have that up on our YouTube channel soon. I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment, but anyone is welcome to, oh, let's see. Just got some thank yous going. But if anyone else does want to come off mute to ask a question, please feel free. And we will be emailing out the recording.
Excellent. Yeah. And I'll definitely be in touch with you with the additional pieces of information that you're going to need to go ahead and send that out.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Night, everyone.